This is a streaming sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Hank Stevenson. I'm the co-founder of the Arizona Agenda, a daily newsletter covering Arizona politics and government, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate. Please note, candidates from both the House and Senate are participating in tonight's debate. As the moderator, I will ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents. The questions that I'll ask tonight are coming directly from the voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Agenda, the Arizona Capital Times, and the Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you voters. So if you're watching this debate live tonight, you can submit questions at any time. Do that through email, debates@kc-a.com, or you can text them in 480-808-1814, or you can even call them at 480-937-1253. Please specify if your question is for specific candidates or all the candidates. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplication, speeches, or personal attacks. This debate is scheduled for about an hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. All right, tonight we'll be hearing from the candidates in Legislative District 9, which covers West Mesa and a sliver of Tempe. We should note LD9 is one of the most competitive districts in the state. Candidates, you'll have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements, 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. All right, candidates running for the state Senate are Democrat Eva Birch and Republican Robert Scantlebury, who chose not to be with us tonight. In the House, voters, you get to vote for 2 candidates. Your candidates are Democrat Lorena Austin and Seth Plotman. Republicans Kathy Pierce and Marianne Mendoza chose not to be with us this evening. All right, candidates, get ready for your opening remarks. And why don't we start with you, Ms. Birch?
Thank you. Again, I am Eva Birch. I am running for the state Senate in Legislative District 9. Thank you to the Clean Elections Commission for having us and to the viewers at home for being invested in this process. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. I went to Valley Public Schools from kindergarten all the way through high school. I've been a nurse for over 10 years. I went to college right here in my district in LD9. I worked primarily in emergency department, but I have also worked in pediatric home health for a time. And eventually I did go back to school for my master's degree. And I currently work as a nurse practitioner in a women's health clinic here in Mesa. I am running for state Senate to really represent my district. I'm committed to listening to LD9 residents and to representing their values and their interests in the legislature. As a nurse, I saw how so many different factors really impact the quality of healthcare and health outcomes that people experience. Most outwardly insurance status, but other things, housing insecurity, food insecurity, access to quality education. There are racial and gender disparities, language barriers, economic barriers, and I'm hoping that I can work with other legislators, with organizations and individuals to try to create a better Arizona for all of us. So thank you so much again, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. All right, our House candidates. Ms. Austin, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. Thank you to Hank and Clean Elections. And I'm really excited to be here with what I think is the best Democratic team slate here. And so, right now Arizonans are deciding literally right now and on November 8th if we want to progress as a state or we want to go backward. For me, this race is super personal, as my family has lived in this district for over 100 years. And I can tell you in those 100 years, they've exemplified to me what it means to show up and work hard for my community. My nana and tata owned a little tiendita, a little grocery store here in the segregated community at the time, and they were champions and for advocating for rights of minorities here in Mesa. My father is a civil rights attorney. My mother's a social worker and teacher. So I think it's really no surprise that I'm here advocating for Arizonans. But I love this community. I mean, I work here, I live here, I volunteer here, and this is my home, and I understand our diverse and vibrant community. I've worked in public, private, and nonprofit sectors throughout the Valley, and so I look forward to bringing collaborative solutions to the legislature that will improve not just the lives of our constituents in LD9, but of all Arizonans. And I do believe that Arizonans want new leadership. I think they want leadership that's representative of themselves and relatable. And as an educator who works at my local community college, Mesa Community College, where I attended and was student body president, I really believe I can bring a new perspective to the legislature, again, one that is collaborative and community minded. And so I look forward to tonight's questions, and thank you again for letting us be here.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Plotman, you're up. Tell the voters a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, and thank you again to Clean Elections for having us. My name is Seth Plotman. I am running for State House in LD9. I'm a business owner, and I grew up in Arizona. So I took over running a family business about 10 years ago. It's furniture manufacturing. We also have a retail store. This was coming out of the Great Recession, and like a lot of small businesses, my business or my family's business had fallen on some tough times. So I was called on the phone and said, come home, take over running it. The idea was I was going to bring some new ideas, some new direction. And of course I said yes. And I was brought in there to make major reforms. We were getting the same outcomes, bad ones, but we weren't looking at the real reasons why. So I want to bring my business mindset, my reform mindset now to the legislature. I think we're getting outcomes that we don't always want. I think we see propositions passed like Prop 208, giving $1 billion to public schools, and then the legislature and the courts do the opposite. We also see direct to the ballot that we don't want to expand vouchers, yet our legislature does the opposite. We have an issue here where our legislature is not representing what the people want. I want to look at reforms to try to fix that.
Okay. Well, let's touch on a couple of those topics here as we get into questions. I guess a good place to start is public education. And we've already had a couple of questions come in from the audience. One of them is essentially, do you believe Arizona's K-12 public education system as a whole is adequately funded? And if not, how much more should we put into it? And why don't we start with the House candidates? Lorena, why don't you start this one off?
Sure. Yes, I think all of us would agree that our K-12 is not being adequately funded. And there are things we can do to change that. We're bottom 5 in the country in education spending, and that's just embarrassing. And our children and teachers deserve better. So we could be doing things like replacing the aggregate expenditure limit that is from the 1980s that doesn't account for rising costs and just a new generation in general. I mean, think of even the technological advances we've made there. And I think it's awful that we have to ask our teachers who willingly year after year come and advocate for simple funding so that they can teach our students and have resources and have proper salaries to combat that. So I think we're facing a really epic demise in our public education, and we need to be fully investing in education, ensuring that we address our teacher shortage, ensuring that our children have every resource accessible to them so they can be prosperous in the future.
And let me reiterate the second part of that question. How much is it going to take?
I think it'll take as much as for us to, unfortunately, we'd even take, a moderate standing in education funding. But right now, you could look at, the budget as a pie chart, and you would say we might be spending a lot. But again, we're really not catching up to the amount of money it takes to fully fund a public education system. So an exact dollar amount I don't have for you, but what I do know is we have a $5 billion surplus right now that we could be using to fund education. So I think fully funded looks like being number 1 in the country.
Okay. Mr. Plotman? Seth?
Yeah, we are 48th in the nation in how much we're spending on education. Being bottom 5 in anything is bad, let alone how much we're investing in our children's future. We're 42nd in teacher pay. We have classroom sizes biggest in the country, the worst counselor to student ratio in the country, crumbling infrastructure. This means something about what our state cares about if we're in the bottom 5 and how much we're looking to the future. I want to fully fund education. I would start with the $1 billion that Prop 208 gave to public schools, then the legislature did the opposite. Getting out of the bottom 5, I think, is reasonable for any state to aspire to.
Okay. And Eva, what's your take?
Yeah, so I can echo my running mate sentiments. We definitely do need to find a permanent solution to the aggregate expenditure limit. It doesn't make any sense. It's really a punitive policy at this point. It's hamstring schools from being able to spend the funds that are allocated to them. So we can continue to increase funding, but if we don't give our schools access to those funds, then it sort of defeats the purpose. But in Arizona, almost 1/3 of our students do not have a permanent qualified teacher. And that's not because we don't have any teachers here. We have over 56,000 qualified teachers who are not using their teaching certificates. And that's largely because of the working conditions in Arizona. We're not supporting our schools and we're not supporting our teachers. We should be raising teacher salaries and support staff salaries at least to the national median. And I think in overall spending, that's also a reasonable goal. We should at least be at the national median to be able to reduce class sizes. We have some of the nation's largest class sizes. We have the worst counselor to student ratio in the country. There are so many things that we need to do, and we're not going to be able to accomplish them if we do not increase the budget.
Let me follow up on a couple of things that we touched on here. Teacher pay being one, but also the aggregate expenditure limit. Am I correct in assuming that all three of you would prefer sending this back to the voters to eliminate it entirely rather than every year having the legislature lift it temporarily?
Yeah, I mean, well, so going direct to the voters is one way of doing it, but our legislature should have the foresight to be able to realize that this is unsustainable. The AEL is used as a political football. Our kids is used as a political football. We all recognize this is wrong, yet year after year we keep doing this. AEL should be the legislature that gets rid of it.
And Eva, Lorena, hop in there.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, we need a permanent solution. Sorry, Lorena, you can go.
No, I think we do need a permanent solution. And even if it was sent back to the voters, I think we need lawmakers and legislatures that will listen to the will of the voters. And that's obviously not what we have seen. So I totally agree with Seth that the legislature should be the ones to take it away. But also we need to be mindful that the voters, again, did champion bipartisanly this issue, and the legislature should have listened to the will of the people.
Okay. And teacher pay, well, teacher retention more than anything. And I want to ask everyone, everyone knows if we paid our teachers more, they would probably stick around longer. What can we do besides raising salaries or raising benefits? Is there something that we could do as a state that would help teachers stay here that is not simply paying them more? And why don't we start with the House candidates? Lorena, you want to go again?
I'm sure. Yeah, it's not just about teacher pay, but also resources and support that they get, and not just for teachers, but also staff. And so I think right now, unfortunately, we are facing a massive teacher shortage. And we are also seeing, new and young teachers who want to teach coming out of college, but many of them are leaving the state because regardless of lack of pay, they also know they don't have the support and resources that other school districts across the country could offer. So I think it's not just about pay, it's also providing those extra things in addition to infrastructure and ensuring that they have a vibrant place to, work.
Okay, Seth, any policies we could change to make them stick around that doesn't involve paying more money?
Yeah, so I mean, 50% of our teachers leave in the first 5 years. By investing more money, we don't need to necessarily 42nd in the nation how much we pay them, but reducing classroom sizes, we are overburdening our teachers. Teachers are exhausted. I talk to teachers every day, and they've been out there collecting signatures for years to try to get adequate funding, but year after year they see it counteracted by the legislature. we can tell a lot by society, but how, we value our teachers, and it's time we give them the support they deserve.
Okay. Eva?
Yeah, I think in addition to just pay, we need to look also at the facilities where the teaching is taking place, the technology that's available, the quality of the books and the supplies. There are a lot of different failings that are occurring, and I think that our approach has to be comprehensive.
Okay. I want to touch on ESAs, empowerment scholarship accounts, vouchers for private schools. Considering you're all Democrats, I think it's safe to assume that none of you supported the law that the legislature passed this year instituting universal ESAs. But let me ask you, is there any level of ESAs that Arizona should be allowing? Would you vote to eliminate the program completely if given the chance? And our Senate candidate, why don't you field this one first?
Sure. I know that there's a lot of value in many of the charter schools in Arizona. I don't seek to completely eliminate that system. I also, as someone who worked in pediatric home health as a nurse, I understand how there are different needs for different students, and that we have to have systems in place to make sure that there's equal opportunity. What I have a problem with is using to fund private and religious schools that are not transparent with their spending and that don't meet the same standards as the public schools. Every time that somebody gets one of these vouchers, it's $7,000 away from our public school system. And a lot of individuals who are going to be taken advantage of this new policy are already going to private or religious schools. And so that's just leaching money from an already bare bones system. They are not going to have fewer students for those individuals. They're just going to have less resources. So I don't want to do away with I don't think that that's popular legislation with the people in my district. And it's important to me that I am representing my community, but I think that we have to have certain standards and that we have to know that the transparency and the accountability is really important, and that that's a value that Arizona voters care about.
Okay, so now and some transparency built in. Mr. Plotman, why don't you field this one next?
Yes, I have no problem with, again, the idea of charter schools, private schools. The real problem is that these schools are succeeding at the expense of public schools. And like Eva said, $7,000 leaves a public school to go to one of these schools. The lack of accountability, the lack of oversight. Let's start by instituting those two things, and we can talk about how far we want to go with vouchers.
Okay, Lorena?
Yeah, I get to be an echo chamber here because I agree with everything my running mates have said, but we currently don't have a two-tiered system when it comes to ESA and vouchers. So ESA vouchers, this model directly siphons money directly from our public schools. And like Seth and Eva said, there's a lack of oversight that comes to some of these charter and private schools. There's even some instances where some of this funding has gone towards a private home gym, and it's just not a responsible stewardship of tax dollars. So I think we need to be having that transparency and accountability when it comes to ESA vouchers.
Okay. What is the definition of critical race theory as you understand it, and should it be taught in our K-12 public schools? And let's just go in the same reverse order there. Lorena, you mind fielding this one again?
Sure. So CRT, to my knowledge, is not being taught in classrooms. It is actually a graduate level curriculum that has nothing to do with K-12. It's also become this really loose and undefined term and basically a false narrative, but it's taking, I really do believe it's taking our teachers and classrooms' ability away to teach accurate history and being really inclusive of that history. And as a student who didn't really learn about their history until college, their culture and community, I think it is really important that we are teaching accurate history, because accurate history is inclusive history. What I do know is we are not teaching CRT at graduate level curriculum in our K-12 schools currently.
Okay. Seth?
Yeah, as far as I know, it's a law school thing that I don't think many elementary school students are too interested in. This is sort of an invented problem. cable news channel, you might hear it over and over again, but that doesn't mean it's an actual, this is not something that's actually being taught. And I think this actually leads into a more, an issue that's actually before the legislature, which is I don't believe our legislature should be censoring what is being taught. Really it's teachers that should decide what's being taught with the advice of parents. And to go off on this tangent that doesn't really exist is not helpful to anyone.
All right. Eva?